Over the last year, much has been said in regard to the MCU's latest theatrical offering, The Marvels. It has been labeled as, potentially, the worst MCU movie ever and Marvel Disney's most disastrous flop. It has been pilloried as either more woke nonsense or simple mindless drivel, all from writers who have forgotten, or never actually learned in the first place, how to write. It became the target of mockery and scorn long before it was ever released. After having seen the movie, my take on all of this is a bit different. My view on the Marvels is this. This movie was inevitable. Allow me to explain. Some years ago, during a conversation about the MCU, which took place during the height of Phase 3, I made the comment to someone that as long as Stan Lee was alive and active within the Marvel Universe, that the movies would be true to what the comics were in their heyday, particularly when you're talking about the characters that were being featured in the Marvel films of that time. But I also stated once Stan Lee either got to a point where he could no longer be involved or unfortunately passed away, others would take his place and begin to force the MCU franchise in a completely different direction. And unfortunately, I was proven correct. Now, as far as being inevitable, there are a number of contexts for that statement. First, this movie had to happen. After Captain Marvel 1, it was announced that there would be a Captain Marvel 2. The Marvel Disney sort of stuck with that. They kept promoting it. It was delayed for a number of reasons, but they sort of had to do it for contractual reasons. And in that context, it's understandable. My point is more that this movie was bound to happen. And what I mean that was bound to happen is that given the direction that the MCU went, or was taken, or directed toward, after Stan Lee's departure from the industry and others taking over the molding and shaping of the franchise, this was bound to happen. This movie was bound to have to be put on the screen. Because when you put agenda-driven zealots in charge, this is what you get. Put agenda-driven zealots in charge, and eventually the destruction of whatever they are in charge of is complete.
I am inevitable.
This movie represents the pop culture epitome of the allegorical expression, a bright and shining lie. And those who crafted it should be proud. Not because they accomplished something worthy, mind, because they haven't, but rather because they remain true to themselves. And The Marvels is their crowning achievement. Now, in the effort to avoid the charge of absolute negativity permeating my discussion, a few positive notes for those who decide to go see this film. Some of the visuals were indeed quite stunning. I saw the film in 3D and would suggest others also choose that option if available. The employment of varied camera angles, particularly during the open space moments, yielded some impressive results. Teyonah Parris as Monica Rambeau and Iman Vellani as Miss Marvel delivered respectable performances. Vellani appeared to actually be enjoying herself, and her delivery reflected that charm. In addition, Zawe Ashton as Girl Boss Ronan effectively exuded that whole ex-girlfriend, I'm gonna egg your car, angry bitch persona.
Who were those hoes on your Snapchat, Johnny? Who was this? Who is Sissy?
Many of her facial expressions I found particularly enticing and familiar because, you know, that whole ex-girlfriend thing. Plank of Wood, however, was Plank of Wood. After this movie, Brie Larson will move on from the MCU, and I can't say I blame her. Her desire to become divested of all things Marvel was the one true shining light in a movie full of shining lights, radiating from her regardless of what outfit she was wearing. There were moments during this film when Larson's on-set tension with her co-stars was plastered on a screen for all the world to see, because it was plastered all over her face. And her emotional moments meant to engender some form of either sympathy or reaction from the viewing audience were reminiscent of being paid a compliment from someone you know hates you. She did look good, however, no doubt. According to some reports, over $300 million was spent to both produce and promote this movie. After watching it, you have to ask the logical question, where did all that money go? At what point do the investors ask that question? The pacing of this film was chaotic, the humor either cringe or incredibly lame, and the plot more worthy of an episodic television series at best. The movie felt both rushed and drug out at the same time, and that has to be some form of accomplishment. In context of all of Marvel, what you would expect, what you would expect out of a Marvel movie, okay, there's enough there but there's no urgency to it. There's never any sense that anything is truly at stake, even though in context of what the villain is trying to do, it's kind of high stake for the planets that she goes to. And the Skrulls show up, and the Kree, it's sort of a continuation of the Kree-Skrull War, which is only in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Kree-Skrull War has only been sort of hinted at and talked about a little bit here and there. In the comics, if you're a fan of the comics, the Kree-Skrull War was a huge deal, and a lot of Marvel characters were involved in the Kree-Skrull War. But in the MCU, it's just all sort of hinted at. So that's brought up again, and that's sort of part of the framework that the plot uses to move along. And there's actually one scene where the Kree and the Skrull are both shown on the screen for the first time. And I thought that's kind of cool, but I haven't really liked what Marvel has done with the Skrulls so far. And they're no better in this movie. They're just not. They're no better in this movie, which is kind of a shame. The Kree are pretty cool, actually. What they did with the Kree in the movie are pretty cool. But again, there's never any sense of dread. There's never any sense of urgency. The jokes, they try to do Marvel humor, but there's not much humor to it at all. Brie Larson looks good in the film. I mean, she does. Brie Larson looks amazing in this movie. There was just all this build-up in recent weeks by Marvel attempting to tie this movie, the Marvels, into what had come before. They attempted to tie it to movies like Infinity War and Endgame, where if you watch the final trailer that came out for the Marvels, the final trailer that Disney released, it starts out with an image of Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man and Chris Evans as Captain America is in it. And then they show Thanos, right? Well, none of that is even... None of those guys are in the Marvels. And there's no mention. There's not even any mention of any of those guys in the Marvels. They were simply trying to tie the villain of the Marvels back to what had come before to make her appear to be a Thanos-level threat. She was a threat to the individual planets that she was going to. You know, you go to a planet and you steal their atmosphere. That's going to give everybody, a headache at least, right? You're going to have a bad day. And then you go to another planet and you steal all their water. That's going to leave a mark, right? But Thanos was a universal threat. Thanos wiped out half the life in all the universe. And so this broad, as well acted as the role may have been, she was no galactic threat. She just had a grudge. My favorite part of the movie, and spoiler alert here, my favorite part of the movie was when Kate Bishop showed up. Now, I know it was a throwaway scene meant to set up the Young Avengers, and whether or not Marvel will ever proceed with that remains to be seen. But for those of you who perhaps saw my video that I did on the Hawkeye series, then you know that I truly did like the Kate Bishop character. I thought her character was well done, it was well motivated, it was believable. And my only problem with the Hawkeye series was that it was too short. I thought it should be at least 8 episodes, yet they only did 6. Particularly when given that they reintroduced the Kingpin. But I was glad to see Kate Bishop show up, and it was one moment in the movie that I really got excited. I really got excited. But overall, the film was just a disjointed mess. It's not the worst Marvel fare ever to be put out. I would rate it perhaps on a level equal to Thor: Love and Thunder. And so if you liked Love and Thunder, you may get something out of this. If you didn't like Love and Thunder, then you'll feel right at home, I suppose, if you go see the Marvels. It's a disappointment, which just adds to a long string of current Marvel disappointments. But as I talked about in my previous video when I discussed the Variety magazine article about the MCU, I think this will prove to be a turning point. And I do not wish to sound trite when I say that when you judge the MCU simply by the Marvels, then it would be hard to imagine that the MCU could get any worse. But I really don't think it is going to get worse. I think from this point it will get better simply out of necessity. Simply because someone's finally beginning to wake up and say, we have to try to go back to the level of excellence that we achieved before, or the franchise will eventually just wither away and die. So this movie, again, I feel was inevitable. It had to happen. It was bound to happen. It has happened. And we as MCU fans, we can abandon the project, which I will not do as a fan, or we can hope that it will begin to change and improve from this point on. And that is the track that I am going to take. That I think from this point on, the fare that we begin to see will improve. So with that, I will say thank you for watching. I do appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.
Sure.
At the rate you were going, you would have been here all night.
You know, you could have paced things out, give the folks a little bit more of a show.
Nah, I think they're ready for dessert.